Crime Agency has hailed its success in convicting 18 members of an international gang which smuggled in billions of pounds worth of drugs into the country.
It started on a quiet street in Cheshire. Nice houses, clean cars, nothing out of place. But behind one of those doors, a man was running the biggest drug smuggling operation the UK has ever seen. His name was Paul Green, a 59-year-old living what looked like a normal life. But underneath it all, he was moving tons of cocaine, heroin and cannabis across borders, hidden in boxes of onions, ginger and garlic. Over 3 years, Green and his crew smuggled an estimated £7 billion worth of drugs into the UK. Not small jobs. This was industrial. Warehouses, fake companies, business accounts. A system designed to look real, built to stay hidden. In 2024, it all came crashing down. 18 people were convicted, dozens of fake businesses were exposed, and one of the longest trials in UK legal history finally brought the truth out into the open. This wasn't backstreet dealing. It was high-level, organised crime, and when it fell apart, it showed just how deep the trade goes, and how far some will go to keep it going. Paul Green didn't look the part. He didn't act like someone running one of the UK's biggest drug smuggling operations. He lived in Widnes, Cheshire, a place where neighbours might nod politely but wouldn't ask too many questions. And that suited him perfectly. His strength wasn't force, it was planning. Green understood that real power doesn't always come from fear or violence. It comes from being invisible, from blending in. While others chased status, Green chased control. He built a structure designed to avoid suspicion at every level. He set up fake businesses, some based on real companies, others entirely made up. He created forged documents, VAT numbers, and false paper trails. He used hotels for internet access, encrypted phones for communication, and rented warehouses across the UK to move and hide drugs, each one a drop-off point in a bigger network. He didn't just bring in his own product. He ran routes for other UK crime groups too, offering them access to his infrastructure for a price. In return, they got shipments delivered clean, no questions, no loose ends. Green's method was about making crime look ordinary. Loads came in wrapped in garlic, ginger or onions, strong-smelling cover to fool customs dogs. He imported up to 50 tons of onions a week, sometimes more than needed, just to keep the front believable. When border checks flagged something odd, he'd send the entire load back to Europe and start again. The money was just as carefully handled. Between 2016 and 2018, £1.5 million moved through his and his wife's bank accounts. Luxury watches, jewellery, mortgage fraud, all of it hidden behind shell companies and borrowed identities. In one case, he and an accomplice stole a man's identity to take out a £262,000 mortgage on his home, using the funds to settle debts tied to a failed drug run. Green wasn't a man who took chances. He used people with skills, men who spoke Dutch, men who could rent warehouses without drawing attention, men who understood how to keep quiet. His crew wasn't hired for muscle, they were chosen for reliability. For years it worked. Green stayed off the radar. He kept his hands clean. But the bigger the operation got, the harder it became to hide. What Paul Green created wasn't just a smuggling route. It was a full-blown criminal supply chain. A blueprint for industrial-scale drug trafficking that stretched from the Netherlands to every corner of the UK. At the heart of it all was one idea: make it look legitimate. Green and his crew didn't rely on backdoor deals or shady handoffs in dark car parks. They built fake companies, cloned real ones, and worked with legitimate suppliers to create cover. Shipments were booked under proper names. VAT numbers were in place. Paperwork matched. On the surface, everything checked out. Drugs were packed into boxes, crates, and hollowed-out pallets. One batch was hidden in boxes of ginger, another buried inside cardboard boxes at a rented warehouse in the Netherlands. The gang even tried to smuggle amphetamine-based oil in fake cream bottles, worth over £1 million. In another case, cocaine was sent under a fake company cloned from a real fruit importer based in Cornwall. The routes were carefully chosen. The Netherlands acted as a key hub, with warehouses used to store and repackage drugs before they were driven into the UK. Deliveries were set for Bolton, Wigan, Leeds, Sheffield, Preston, Warrington, and further. Each location was chosen to avoid attention, using commercial premises rented under false names. Over the course of just a few years, investigators believe there were at least 240 importations, many more than what was actually seized. If even half of those contained what the recovered loads did, the street value of the operation would top £3 billion. Some estimates go even higher, pushing the figure closer to £7 billion, making it the UK's largest known drug smuggling operation. And this wasn't just for Green's crew. He ran a service. Other organised crime groups would tap into his routes, paying for safe transport of their own shipments. Green offered scale, secrecy, and a near foolproof method of getting past customs. But the more complex the operation became, the more people it relied on. Warehouse workers, drivers, packers, and every extra set of hands meant more risk. Green's success had always depended on staying under the radar, but as the network grew, that got harder to control. Eventually, it would all begin to fall apart, not because of high-tech surveillance or a lucky break, but because someone along the line made a mistake. For years, Paul Green's operation moved like clockwork. The paperwork lined up, the shipments cleared, and the money flowed. Everything had its place. Warehouses, drivers, disguises. It was a machine built to run smoothly and quietly. But no system, no matter how clever, is perfect forever. The first major slip came in September 2016. A Dutch haulage driver hired to deliver a seemingly standard consignment noticed something wasn't right. The boxes didn't feel right. The weight was off. And the smell? Overpowering, stronger than onions or garlic. Instead of following orders, he trusted his gut, drove back to the depot and called the police. Inside his trailer, officers found 81 kilograms of cocaine, each brick marked with symbols identifying different UK-based gangs. It was clear these weren't leftovers from street dealers. This was distribution-level product headed for multiple organised crime groups, and it blew open the first part of Green's empire. Then came the Amsterdam blunder. Russell Leonard, one of Green's trusted men, was in charge of a high-value delivery, 57 kilos of amphetamine worth over £1 million. But instead of keeping a low profile, Leonard and his partner spent the night drinking. They left the van, packed with drugs, unattended in a suburb of Amsterdam. Dutch officers, already monitoring their calls, were listening. As soon as they climbed into the van the next morning, police pounced. Other cracks followed. One cloned company, set up to move 8 kilos of cocaine, triggered red flags during routine customs checks. The operation's clean image began to wear thin. Too many deliveries, too much movement. Border Force grew suspicious. Surveillance increased. It didn't stop there. A joint operation between UK and Dutch officers raided multiple sites, leading to the seizure of 450 kilos of cocaine and heroin, along with 2 tons of cannabis. Warehouses in Lincolnshire, Killingholme, and Immingham were cleared out. The group had been moving product like clockwork, but now the clock was broken. The downfall wasn't dramatic. There were no shootouts or sudden betrayals, just bad timing, tired workers, and pressure from all sides. One mistake led to another. And with every slip, Green's control weakened. He'd built something massive, but in the end it was too complex to stay invisible and too fragile to survive under the spotlight. Once the cracks began to show, the full weight of law enforcement came down hard. This wasn't a quick raid or a lucky tip-off. It was a coordinated multi-agency takedown, the National Crime Agency, NCA, working side by side with UK Border Force, Dutch police, and European partners. They weren't just going after the drugs, they were going after the entire structure. The NCA had been watching for months. After a string of seizures, they quietly stepped up their investigation. Surveillance teams tracked vehicles, monitored warehouses, tapped encrypted phone lines, and followed money trails. They watched as drugs came in and cash went out. Each new delivery led them deeper into the network. In the Netherlands, authorities did the same. Green's connections left a clear path. rented storage units, fake companies, suppliers linked to the UK. Dutch officers placed key individuals under surveillance. Phone calls were intercepted, vehicles were bugged, locations were mapped out. And once the operation was airtight, both countries struck at once. Russell Leonard was already in custody, caught red-handed with 57 kilos of amphetamine in Amsterdam. He'd been trusted with major shipments, fluent in Dutch and familiar with European routes, but his arrest had opened a window. Investigators used him to build a clearer picture of how drugs were being packed, routed, and sent out across the UK. More arrests followed. Green had brought in men like Sar Casey, Kedvazia, and Ganzafa Mahmoud to expand his network. They helped connect the group with a Dutch criminal syndicate run by Barbara Ringbit, 53, and Johannes Vester, 54. The pair were captured, extradited to the UK, and later jailed for 18 and 20 years. It wasn't just street runners being taken down. This was a web of experienced international criminals, people who spoke multiple languages, managed fake accounts, and handled customs paperwork better than some shipping firms. Investigators uncovered over a dozen warehouses in Leeds, Preston, Sheffield, Warrington, and more, all rented under fake names, all used to move product. When police finally raided Green's home, it was the final piece. They found £10,000 in cash, high-end watches, and a paper trail showing £1.5 million had quietly passed through his and his wife's accounts. His cover businesses, cleaning and hairdressing, didn't come close to explaining it. Only 2 tax returns had been filed in 5 years. For Green, the game was over. But for law enforcement, this wasn't just about locking up one man. It was about taking apart a system that had helped flood the country with drugs for years, piece by piece, route by route. By the time the final arrests were made, the evidence against Paul Green and his network was overwhelming. But turning it into convictions took time. A case of this size couldn't be rushed. The amount of material gathered, surveillance, financial records, border seizures, encrypted messages, witness statements, was massive. 2 separate trials were needed to deal with the number of defendants. The first, held at Manchester Crown Court, became one of the longest-running criminal trials in the history of England and Wales, lasting an astonishing 23 months. The second stretched across 9 months. In total, 18 individuals were put on trial for their roles in the conspiracy. Reporting restrictions were in place during proceedings. For nearly 3 years, the public had no idea the UK's biggest drug smuggling network was being quietly dismantled behind closed doors. When those restrictions were finally lifted in 2024, the scale of the case became public for the first time. Prosecutors laid out a conspiracy involving at least 240 importations, spanning from 2015 to 2018. They presented clear links between the defendants, false companies, forged documents, and huge volumes of Class A and B drugs, moving from Dutch warehouses to British cities using commercial infrastructure. The court heard how Paul Green had built a fake world that looked real on paper, complete with cloned businesses, faked export documents, and shell firms with genuine VAT numbers. Witnesses explained how drugs were disguised in food products and how international partners were used to keep the system running. In the end, the jury had no doubt. The evidence was too strong, the trail too long. Guilty verdicts were returned across the board. Years of hidden operations were finally exposed, and one of the most sophisticated smuggling rings the UK has ever seen was finished. When the final verdicts were read out, there was no surprise in the courtroom. The evidence had been clear. The network was vast, the profits enormous, and the damage undeniable. But now came the part that mattered most to many. What punishment would this group face for flooding the UK with billions of pounds worth of drugs? Paul Green, the man at the top, received 32 years in prison. At 59, it was effectively a life sentence. The judge made it clear, Green wasn't just another dealer. He was a trusted and crucial link in a chain that brought addiction, violence, and misery into communities across the country. He'd gone to extreme lengths to hide his crimes, using stolen identities, mortgage fraud, and front companies to cover his tracks. Others followed. Russell Leonard, the trusted foot soldier fluent in Dutch and key to operations in the Netherlands, was handed 24 years. Barbara Ringbit and Johannes Vestor, extradited from the Netherlands, were jailed for 18 and 20 years. Sarkesi, Kedvazia and Ganzafar Mahmoud, the men who helped build and manage the UK side of the operation, also received lengthy sentences, ranging from 15 to 21 years, depending on their roles. The judge was clear. This wasn't street-level crime. This was organised, commercial and high-risk, built with intent and run with precision. He called it industrial-scale drug trafficking and said the group had facilitated distribution across the UK and caused widespread harm. The court heard how their actions didn't just fund luxury watches or warehouse leases, they helped fuel county lines, turf wars and murders. The judge put it plainly. Without people like you, there would be no drug trade at this level. But was it enough? In one sense, yes. The sentences were some of the harshest handed down for drug conspiracy in recent UK history. The structure of the gang, the international reach, and the sheer scale of what was moved all played a role in pushing those numbers up. By comparison, in other high-profile drug cases, like the Enquirer busts or the Keon-Lincoln County Lines investigations, sentences ranged from 8 to 29 years. Green's 32-year term reflects the damage caused and his key position at the top. Still, there's a bigger question here. What happens after? Most of the men sentenced were older, not teenagers caught up in street dealing, but adults who chose to set up complex systems for profit. They knew what they were doing. And yet, even after their removal, the routes they built could be copied. The contacts passed down. The demand is still there. The drugs haven't stopped. So while the sentences were fair, even heavy by UK standards, they only go so far. Justice was served in the courtroom, but the ripple effects of what this gang built will be felt for years. The truth is, this wasn't just one organisation. It was a blueprint, and there's always someone ready to pick it up.